Welcome to the 4Heroes podcast. This episode is from the 4Heroes Huddle, a local gathering of law enforcement officers to seek hope and help from God's Word. We've made it to commandment number 6, no murder. Chaplain Frank Mercer does a great job communicating how relevant this command is by framing it with Jesus' words from Matthew chapter 5. Many people see it as obvious or maybe even silly for God to say, do not murder, but the heart of the commandment is that God's people would reflect his character as a life giver. As a first responder, a commitment to bring life into the situations you face and calls you run or take can reflect the character of our good God.
So happy Monday. It's good to see you. I hope you had a fantastic weekend. Everybody got to get their chop on for the Braves this afternoon. We need at least one of the two. If we get the two, we don't have any Mets to deal with. That makes me happy. But I'll take one. Hey, we are moving forward. We are to commandment number 6. Commandment number 6. 1991. There are 2 hikers in the Italian Alps who stumble across a corpse. This feels like an episode of Law and Order. Boom, boom. This corpse is frozen in the snow and ice where it has been for, well, they estimate about 5,300 years. They gave him a name, Otzi. Otzi the Iceman. Otzi. Sounds nice enough. It's the oldest intact corpse ever found. And interesting, guess what? He had apparently been murdered. Yeah. Shot in the back with an arrow. Not the last time somebody got shot in the back. In fact, both the Old Testament and the New Testament begin with murders. Genesis 4, Cain kills his brother, his own brother. Matthew 2, King Herod wipes out every male baby 2 years old and under in the city of Bethlehem. In both cases, because somebody took predominance, position, power. I'm going to tell you something before we read this commandment that I'll have to come back to, but I just can't hold it in. This is a secret that you may not know about yourself, and you may not know about me. But we, all of us in this circle, are murderers. Oh. It's not one of those games where you go, somebody in this circle is a murderer. No, everybody in this circle is a murderer. Exodus 20:13 says, you shall not murder. Just 4 words. In the original language, it's 2 words. Translated, no murder. It's the shortest of the commands. And it's pretty much universally accepted, Murder's a bad idea. Murder's wrong. Pretty much in every civilized society, every culture in human history has condemned murder. Nobody thinks this is a good idea, except, of course, murderers. So when you read this, it almost feels irrelevant. Because it's like none of us, I think none of us have actually killed somebody, strangled somebody, shot somebody, stabbed somebody. Surprise me later if I'm wrong. It almost feels like God is like needlessly burned one of the 10 commandments on something that's so obvious. We may have done some terrible, terrible things. But at least we never killed anyone, right? Right? Un momento, por favor. Let me take you to the New Testament and hear the words of Jesus. Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 21. This is from the greatest sermon ever preached, Sermon on the Mount. Matthew chapter 5. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder. And anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, here we go. You thought you understood. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court, and anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. How are you feeling about commandment number 6 now? The point of what Jesus is saying is that he's not just concerned with kind of the fruit of the crime, he's actually concerned with the root of the crime, where it all starts. So in light of what Jesus says, we discover there's more to commandment number 6 than maybe we imagined. We discover that fundamentally commandment number 6 is about how we treat others, how we treat people, because the quality of our relationships dictates the quality of our life. It all really boils down to this: life is precious. All life is precious. In other words, people matter to God. So we shouldn't dehumanize the people that God loves. You shall not murder. This is a sin that you commit, with your hands, stabbing, strangling, shooting, drowning, however it may be. But Jesus says you can commit murder with your mind. You're broken and you want to break people. You're hurt and you want to hurt people. You don't process your pain. It processes you, and you're angry. There are bombs from World War II that are embedded in the ground and in buildings that are still killing people, They turn up and sometimes blow up at a construction site or in a fishing net or on the beach after all these years. They say that the unexploded bombs get more dangerous with time because all the mechanisms corrode and the weapon becomes more and more unstable. So all of this resentment, all of those grudges, all of that anger, it's all like a ticking time bomb with corroding mechanisms. And it's not a matter of if you're going to go off, it's a matter of when you're going to go off and who you're going to go off on. You can commit murder in your mind and you can commit murder with your mouth, Jesus says. He uses the word raka, which was an insult in Aramaic. Think about fool, idiot, moron, jackwagon. Any kind of thing that you might bark out in the heat of the moment in traffic when somebody cuts you off. That kind of thing, You said it because you were angry, but Proverbs 18 says the tongue has the power of life and death. So when you say that, it's an attack on a person's dignity, their self-worth, their character. It's more than just abusive and unkind. In God's eyes, it is the moral equivalent of putting a gun to someone's head or a knife in someone's chest or drowning us all in the coffee shop. And when I say we can murder with our mouths, I am, of course, including social media. because you can absolutely destroy someone on Facebook or Instagram. And in an election year, this is particularly challenging. Anyone who votes for Trump is a moron. Anyone who votes for Kamala is an idiot. It sounds personal, doesn't it? Because it is. And these things become dividing lines that shouldn't divide us. I want to say it's almost second nature to us, but it's really first nature to us that we give into this, and we say things without even thinking. Our family hosts a big Christmas breakfast every year for our family. Everybody comes over to our house, and we labor to feed this whole bunch. It's a special time to us. For some of these family members, it's like we see you every day. Some of them we see every week. Some of them we see once a year at Christmas when they show up hungry for breakfast. I think it's a pretty good deal. They had breakfast, they had Christmas at their house, exchanged gifts and whatnot, and then they show up at our house to eat. Good for them. Anyway, years ago, we had this distant family member who I hadn't seen for a year. She made an observation when she walked into the house that our youngest son, Jake, has gotten super tall. She sees this. She walks into the kitchen. I'm standing there stirring a big pot of grits, full of the Christmas spirit, stirring these grits. And the first thing she says to me is not Merry Christmas or, hey, it's good to see you. She said, or when's this going to be ready? She didn't even say that. I would have preferred that. She said, boy, Jake's gotten so tall. There must be a Negro in your woodpile. Except she didn't say Negro. And I had never heard that before. And that word had never been used in our house, never been spoken by our family. And she just dropped it on Christmas morning. And I was so confused. I looked out the window to see, is there somebody out of the woodpile? What's going on? It took me a minute to realize that she was saying something about, she was connecting it to how tall he was, which still doesn't really make any sense. And she just turned around and walked away. And I was so stunned. I was so shocked that that's how I looked, that this had just happened. That I don't know that I spoke the rest of the morning. And I'm pretty sure I didn't speak to her. She just said it, and she laughed, and she moved on like it was nothing. I want to be really clear. If you're a follower of Jesus, speaking that way is not an option. You've got to delete certain words and phrases from your vocabulary if they were ever in your vocabulary. They don't belong there anymore. It's just a way of dehumanizing someone else. It's why followers of Jesus are encouraged to be slow to speak, quick to listen, always speaking the truth in love, seasoning our words with grace. When you consider what Jesus says in Matthew 5 about a commandment from Exodus 20 that you didn't think applied to you, you may suddenly realize that you're a serial killer who's left behind a wake of bodies. It's not a question of whether you've murdered or not. It's a question of what kind of murder you're guilty of. And you realize something else. Commandment number 6 isn't just about taking life. It's about giving life. Genesis 2:7 says that God formed man from the dust of the ground, and he breathed into him the breath of life. This is distinctive from how God created every other creature. God forms man in his own image, and he is a life giver. And so as his image bearers, we are fundamentally life givers, not life takers. You remember the context of the commandment. It's given to people who have been in bondage for over 400 years. In Egypt, marginalized by the Egyptians, treated as less than human, friends and family murdered by the Pharaoh. And now God has brought them out of the land of the dying. He's bringing them into the land of the living, and he's calling them to live differently. So every person in this room is called to live differently. We're made in God's image. The truth is, you've never locked eyes with another person who wasn't made in God's image. We all matter to God. So when you're sitting at the intersection of Highway 54 and 74, and somebody's blocking the box, you can't get through because this guy is blocking the box. You got to take a deep breath and remind yourself that that guy is made in the image of God. That guy matters to God. And so, brother, you matter to me. Also that. Because by thinking that way, I surrender the right to treat others like they don't matter or like they don't matter as much as I do, which is the real problem here. I don't matter more. You don't matter more. In my mind, I can play this out like I'm more put together, I'm smarter, I'm cooler, I'm probably closer to Jesus. I'm better, and you're a nobody. And that way of thinking is just not an option. In God's mind, it is the equivalent of murder. No murder. Tim Keller, he's one of my favorites. I quote him all the time. He said, we must learn to feel the weight of our neighbor's glory. We must learn to feel the weight of our neighbor's glory. That my neighbor is made in the image of God. My neighbor has never mattered to me, but they sure mattered to Jesus, so they better start mattering to me. Let me ask you some questions. Just be real with yourself. They're rhetorical. You don't have to answer out loud. Do people feel loved by you? Do people feel like you take them seriously? When people are with you, do they feel seen and heard by you? Are you in the business of giving life or taking life? That's all I got to say about that.
Thank you for listening to the 4Heroes podcast. We hope that this message encouraged you. As always, whether you're a part of the public safety community or not, we would love to connect with you. 4Heroes offers spiritual and emotional support to first responders and their families through active chaplaincy. If you would like to support our ministry to first responders by giving, volunteering, or praying, please visit 4ourheroes.org to learn more. That's the number 4, 4ourheroes.org.